Welcome to the deep dive.
Good to be talking about this.
Yeah, so today we're tackling a really significant topic, the revolutionary journey of the Chinese Communist Party,
And specifically this idea that comes up, this concept of who.
which you could translate as, what, the correct path for humanity? Something like that?
Yeah, that gets the gist of it. And we're drawing from that discussion featuring Professor Zhang Weiwei and Associate Professor Sun Wengwang.
Right, the one from the SMG Shanghai TV channel.
Exactly. They use it to really connect historical moments to these sort of guiding ideas behind them. It's not just dates and events.
No, it's more the why.
Yeah.
And they really set the stage with a pretty dramatic moment, don't they? HMS Amethyst, April 20th, 1949.
Oh, absolutely. The People's Liberation Army, the PLA, engaging a British warship on the Yangtzes.
And the point they make is this wasn't just some, minor naval incident. It was loaded with symbolism.
Hugely symbolic, marking the end of that whole century of humiliation narrative for China and, the emergence of a different kind of China.
Right, because for, 100 years, foreign powers had pretty much done as they pleased?
Largely, yes, operating with a degree of impunity. So this clash was a signal that things were fundamentally changing.
Okay, so let's get into the specifics of that incident. The PLA was about to launch this massive campaign, the Crossing the River campaign.
Right, and they'd explicitly warned foreign ships, navies, to get out of the Yangtze River combat zone.
But HMS Amethyst didn't. It sailed right into the PLA's forward positions near Sanjiangyi.
Which, likely reflects that older imperial mindset. Britain had the Royal Navy, historically powerful.
Maybe they just didn't take the PLA seriously. Underestimated them.
Quite possibly. They might have underestimated the resolve of this new kind of army.
Because the context here is crucial, isn't it?
Yeah.
All those previous incidents, the Opium War, Yangtze and Nanjing, Jinan.
Exactly. Situations where China couldn't effectively resist Western military power.
So the PLA's reaction here was a total break from that past.
Completely different. This was an army forged over 22 years of armed struggle under Mao Zedong. Its goals were national liberation, the people's well-being. They weren't intimidated by established powers in the same way.
So the Amethyst pushes on, ignoring the warnings, into this Sanjiangyi area, and then...
A fierce artillery battle erupts. The PLA artillery, despite its limitations, hits the Amethyst hard.
How hard?
Hard enough that it was heavily damaged and significantly raised a white flag.
A white flag. A British warship surrendering to Chinese forces.
The first time, according to the source. A really potent symbol.
And you mentioned limitations with their artillery.
Yeah, it's important context. The PLA was using a real mix of weapons, a lot of it captured. They didn't really have specialized armor-piercing shells.
So hitting a warship effectively would have been really tough.
Very difficult, yeah. Which makes the outcome even more striking.
But the engagement didn't stop there, did it?
No, another British ship, the destroyer HMS Companion, steamed in to try and help the Amethyst.
Okay.
And it opened fire, reportedly launching over 300 shells towards the PLA positions on the bank.
Wow. So serious firepower.
Definitely. But the PLA artillery fought back fiercely. They actually managed to hit the Companion's command tower.
Really?
Yeah, wounding the captain, damaging its guns, enough to force the Companion to pull back.
Incredible resilience. But the British weren't done yet.
Not yet. The British Far East Fleet then sent in heavier reinforcements, the cruiser HMS London and the frigate HMS Black Swan.
And they also entered the combat zone, despite what had just happened.
Apparently so. Again, seemingly disregarding the PLA warnings and the ongoing battle.
That seems quite provocative.
It led to an even more intense fight, especially with HMS London. It had much bigger guns, 203mm, 102mm.
That must have been devastating for the PLA soldiers on the shore.
It was. Tragically, the sources say 252 PLA soldiers were killed or wounded, including a regimental commander. These were troops preparing for the main river crossing.
A heavy price. How did the PLA respond to that kind of firepower?
They concentrated their fire, trying to hit HMS London where it would hurt most the command tower.
And did they succeed?
Remarkably, yes. They scored hits on the bridge area, forcing HMS London, along with HMS Black Swan, to withdraw as well.
So the PLA, with its mixed bag of artillery, essentially fought off multiple British warships, including a cruiser.
That's the narrative presented. It effectively signaled the end of gunboat diplomacy in China. Foreign powers could no longer just sail up rivers and dictate terms.
And this happened right on the eve of the Mainyang's crossing.
Exactly. The sources frame it as a sort of salvo for the full-scale crossing the river campaign that launched the next day, April 21st.
And Mao himself weighed in?
Yes, on the 22nd, he ordered the artillery blockade strengthened, partly to stop Kuomintang ships escaping, but also clearly to deter any more British interference.
What about the wider reaction? Churchill was mentioned.
Yeah, Winston Churchill, though he wasn't prime minister then, apparently called for sending aircraft carriers as retaliation.
Aircraft carriers. Up the Yanks.
Well, quite. Mao's reported response was just 5 characters.
Which means?
Essentially, what will you retaliate with? Or what retaliation? Very defiant.
And the PLA leadership backed this up.
Absolutely. The PLA spokesperson, General Li Tao, issued a very clear statement demanding all foreign military forces, land, sea, air, leave China immediately.
So why didn't Britain retaliate beyond the defiance?
Several factors, likely. Churchill wasn't in charge, as mentioned. Trying to get carriers up the Yangtze probably wasn't feasible anyway.
Okay.
And maybe more importantly, there was likely a growing realization that backing the Kuomintang was, well, a losing bet. Plus, Britain had significant business interests in China they didn't want to jeopardize further.
Pragmatism won out.
It seems so. In fact, Britain moved quite quickly afterwards. January 6, 1950, they became the first major Western power to recognize the People's Republic of China.
Wow, that is fast. Though full diplomatic relations took longer.
Much longer. Yeah, not until 1972. But that early recognition showed a certain pragmatism, a recognition of the new reality, perhaps.
So the takeaway from the Amethyst incident, according to the source discussion.
That sometimes resolute confrontation, standing your ground on sovereignty, is actually necessary to win respect, peace, and dignity in the long run, a lesson they feel is still relevant today.
Which brings us neatly back to this core idea. He, the correct path. And also, he, which means vicissitudes, great changes and hardships.
Exactly. Profound changes, often involving suffering. The video links this to a poem Mao wrote when Nanjing was liberated, April 23rd.
What was the essence of the poem?
It emphasized China standing up, being independent, making its own decisions. That, in essence, was the who, no more imperialist interference.
So for Professor Zhang and Sun, this correct path is basically socialism with Chinese characteristics.
Yes, the path, they argue, was forged through immense struggle, but which ultimately allowed China to achieve development incredibly rapidly.
And they pointed China's current status as evidence.
Right. Things like being the world's largest economy by PPP purchasing power parity.
Which basically measures what your money can actually buy.
Exactly. Plus, having the most complete industrial system, huge domestic market, large middle class, leading in new tech, top trading partner for scores of countries.
They also mentioned managing the COVID-19 pandemic as an achievement.
Yes, framing it as something most countries couldn't replicate on that scale. It all feeds into this narrative, summed up by Xi Jinping's quote they use.
The one about the leap from standing up, getting rich, to becoming strong.
That's the one. An irreversible historical process, as he put it. It's central to how they see China's journey.
But Associate Professor Sun adds another layer to this poem, right? Emphasizing the song, the hardship.
Yes, he stresses that finding and sticking to this path wasn't easy. It involved constant struggle against old ideas, old systems, powerful opponents, marked by a lot of suffering and sacrifice. That's the shit.
To really get that, you have to look back, don't you, at the century before the PRC was founded.
Absolutely. The video references Mao's 1945 writings, where he talked about all the failed attempts to modernize China while it was still semi-colonial, semi-feudal, divided. People dreamed of a strong China, but the path was elusive.
We're talking about movements like the Taiping Rebellion, the 100 Days Reform,
Boxer Rebellion, the 1911 Xinhai Revolution, all ultimately failed to fundamentally change China's trajectory. The core problem, the argument goes, was the lack of a correct path.
Even being on the winning side of World War I didn't help, did it?
No, that was a huge disappointment. Instead of getting back rights, the German concessions in Shandong were just handed over to Japan by the Treaty of Versailles.
Which directly led to the May 4th movement.
Yes, that outpouring of anger and nationalism. And it was in that climate, after so many failures, that Marxism really started to take hold as a potential answer.
An answer to imperialism and feudalism, led by a new kind of party.
That was the idea. But the video really emphasizes how long that search took. 81 years, they calculate, from the Opium War in 1840 to the CCP's founding in 1921. Just decades of searching and struggle.
And even after the CCP was founded, it wasn't smooth sailing. Still, lointain full of vicissitudes.
Definitely not. Mao himself wrote about how long and difficult the Revolutionary War would be, and that failure was always a possibility.
There were some very close calls, weren't there?
Oh, absolutely. The defeat of the First United Front and the White Terror in the late 1920s nearly wiped them out.
And a long march.
A desperate strategic retreat facing massive Kuomintang armies. They lost huge numbers of people. Plus, there were serious internal disagreements about strategy and leadership.
Like before the Zuni Conference.
Exactly, with the Sicherjurfit. The Zuni Conference in 1935 is presented as absolutely pivotal, establishing Mao's leadership in the military and the party center. That's seen as putting the revolution back on track.
Then came the anti-Japanese war, another immense struggle.
Facing a technologically superior invader while also dealing with extreme poverty and blockades, it was incredibly tough.
The video mentions some anecdotes about the hardship.
Yes, like Peng Dehuai finding local cadres literally too weak from hunger to sit up in a meeting, or Mao describing desperate shortages of everything: clothes, oil, salt, paper.
Yet they held on and eventually prevailed.
They did. By the end of the war in 1945, the CCP forces had liberated huge areas and populations. They really became the backbone of the national resistance.
But the human cost of this entire revolutionary period.
It's staggering. The video cites over 3.7 million known revolutionary martyrs just between 1921 and 1949.
3.7 million. That averages out to
Over 370 people per day for 28 years. And the sacrifices didn't end in 1949. They mention the 197,000 lost in the Korean War, including Mao's own son, Mao Anying.
It really puts the Shanahan into perspective. A hard-won victory achieved through immense suffering.
A very long, arduous journey.
So bringing it to the present day, the video loops back to the Amethyst incident. Why is that specific event still seen as so significant?
Well, they contrast it with the situation of some countries today. The firing on the Amethyst is presented as a symbol of asserting national independence, making your own decisions free from external control.
As opposed to being heavily influenced, or as they might put it, controlled by outside powers.
Right. The core message is about the importance of independent decision-making based on your own national interests.
Which, the video acknowledges, isn't always easy in today's world.
No, especially when facing, established global systems, economic pressures, military power, cultural influence. Achieving genuine independence is portrayed as a continuous effort.
And the CCP's role in this, according to Zhang and Sun,
is demonstrating what they call a kind of masculine spirit, maybe firmness or resolve, standing strong on core interests, but also being open to cooperation where it aligns with those interests.
They also talk about a magic weapon.
Yeah, that's a recurring theme. The Kiko is seen as combining Marxist theory with China's actual conditions, its specific realities. Cynicization of Marxism, they call it.
Adapting the ideology.
Constantly adapting it based on practice. It's portrayed as a long process of learning through trial, error, failure, sacrifice, to figure out what actually works for China. Mao's own views on revolution evolved over time, for example.
So it wasn't just theory, but hard-earned experience.
Exactly. And strong leadership was crucial, too. They mention Zhu Enlai convincing Mao to join the Long March when Mao was apparently hesitant.
There's also this principle of Yibin.
Right. Facing challenges with principle, reason, strength, but also restraint. Knowing when to stand firm, when to negotiate, when to compromise, always based on a clear assessment of the situation. Seeking truth from facts.
And finally, they connect this all back to the spirit of the people involved.
Yeah, the spirit of sacrifice. They highlight individuals like Zhang Yimei, the teacher dedicating her life to educating poor girls, and famous revolutionary martyrs like Dong Kunrui or Huang Zhiguang, but also countless ordinary, unnamed party members.
Their dedication is seen as reflecting the strength of belief in that Swoche.
Precisely. The idea that this path, despite the hardships, is worth the immense sacrifice because it serves the people and the nation.
Okay, so wrapping this up, the central thread seems to be that finding and following this Pichongo for China has been anything but easy, full of sha, full of struggle.
Absolutely. But that resilience, that willingness to struggle and sacrifice for a chosen path, is presented as the key to understanding China's transformation and achievements.
And for you, listening in, hopefully this deep dive has given you a sense of the sheer scale of the challenges China faced, and why this idea of a correct path became so vital. It is pretty striking when you consider the odds they faced.
Yeah, that determination against seemingly impossible odds, and the decades-long complex search for a viable way forward. It offers a different lens, perhaps, for understanding China's trajectory.
And connecting it back to relevance today, themes like independence, self-reliance, learning by doing, and that unwavering commitment to national goals, even when things get tough. These are certainly ideas with broad resonance, aren't they?
They hold lessons, perhaps, for navigating complex challenges anywhere, how nations, or even individuals, define and pursue their long-term objectives amidst difficulties.
So, maybe a final thought to leave you with. China believes it found its Oka, and the results are undeniable in many ways. But that journey required constant adaptation, learning, and immense dedication. It makes you wonder, what principles guide your own path in whatever you're pursuing? Definitely something to mull over. Thanks for joining us on The Deep Dive.